Hi, welcome to Jessie James Beads. I'm Jem and today I'd like to talk to you about ear wires, both ones that you can craft yourself if you're out of pre-made ear wires and how to effectively use the ones that you can purchase. So I have a couple of ear wires just here and some charm drops that we made in another video. So I'm going to make a very asymmetric pair of earrings with these. Now if you're familiar with how to open and close a jump ring, you will have no problem at all opening and closing your ear wire loop at the base. So I'm going to bring that up and towards me, so that you get a small aperture into which you can pop any charm that you wish to use. So if you have a ball and a coil on your ear wire, sometimes they can move up and down, but they will go back to where they started from. So I'm going to pop my earring into position, my earring dropper, and you'll see once I've closed this up that this is the face that we want to have coming forwards. Now should you find yourself in a position where the loop on your charm is not in the correct orientation, let's say for instance that this was through 90 degrees and your view would be thus. You have a couple of choices on how you can rectify this simply. So I will show you again exactly what I just did. Is I did one very simple manoeuvre to take the coil at the base of my charm drop around, so that the correct face of the drop sits forwards when seen from the front of the earring finding. If this is not possible for you to achieve, so let's find my other charm. If we attach the charm like so into the finding, what you will see is that the disc at the base of this charm will be in the wrong orientation. So let's assume for a moment that we can't move the coil at the base of this charm. You have one opportunity with your ear wires to twist the loop at the bottom just through 90 degrees. This is because wire has a finite life in terms of how much you can do to it. So you can just do that one time. So check twice before you make that manoeuvre. And then we're going to open up this loop like so, exactly the same as if we were opening a jump ring. We're going to pop our charm into the slot and then close that back up. Once that is closed into position, I'm going to give that just a nice little squish and a squeeze to take the temper of the wire so that it's nice and firm. And then you'll see that the disc down at the bottom of our earring drop sits in the correct orientation. So we've got a very asymmetric pair of earrings here, but that's fine because it shows you how to use those pieces correctly. What to do if you don't have any ear wires available? Well, I'm going to show you now how you can form your very own ear wires simply from a section of round wire. Now I'm working with copper wire in a 20 gauge, which is equivalent to about 0.8 millimeters. This is the very industry standard for what a traditional earlobe piercing will happily accept. Some people may have a slightly smaller piercing, many people will have a larger piercing. If I'm making for myself, I will always use this gauge, 20 gauge of round wire. Now, one of the things that we need to be aware of is that the ends need to be very, very neat and tidy. So I'm going to use the flush side of my cutters just to trim the ends of the wire to begin with, before we get going in creating our design. So I'm going to do that on both sides. When creating earrings, I tend to do as much as possible side by side, so that I end up with a very, very similar aspect in terms of size and shape. So I will make sure to police my wire offcuts in a little while. So this is now approximately 2.5 inches in length. The first thing that I would do is to create small loops down at the base. Now these are the loops that I just twisted through 90 degrees earlier. So I'm going to start very, very slowly by making that shape occur by twisting those pliers around. And I'm going to go for a second turn, like so. If you struggle with mobility in your wrists, it's permissible to either move the wire or the pliers themselves. It depends which is most comfortable for you. So once I've got a complete circular form, like so, what I'm going to do is give that a bit of a squeeze. As I said, when I'm making earrings, I will make sure that as much as possible I make these side by side so that the two pieces are as close as possible to identical. So these look to be the right kind of size, so I'm going to give that a squeeze as well. We're looking for a complete circuit of wire down at the base there, before popping underneath with my very fine tipped bent chain nose pliers and drawing the wire away at 90 degrees. I will always take pains to make sure that the circle, the shape down at the base, is complete and flat and strong before moving on to the next stage of the tutorial. So I'm going to do the same thing on this wire. I'm going to just close that up and give it a squish and a squeeze to make sure that that stays strong. I'm then going to just very gently straighten the bit immediately above that angle that we've just created. Same on the other side. Now for the next section, you can use a pencil or your bail making pliers or any round form that you have to hand. So I'm going to use my ring mandrel because it's right there and it's a very pretty purple. What I'm going to do is to make sure that the cut side of my loops are on the same side before I continue. So they're away from me. And I'm going to stack these one on top of the other. Hold those in position, and in doing so I'm making sure that these end up in a very similar size and shape. So I'm going to use my bent chain nose pliers again, holding the wire from underneath. One is stacked on top of the other. I'm going to start by forming a very gentle loop, a very gentle curve rather, coming away from me. And then I'm going to warm the excess of the wire just past that angle. It's probably less than 40 degrees, I would say, away from the line. Just getting that nice and warm through before I bring in my ring mandrel to create the next part of the shape. Now I'm going to press that down against the mandrel. I just hold it like so. You'll see the orientation of the wire. I'm going to hold on to those little loops down at the base and take the wire around the mandrel until it faces all the way. And if I remove this from the mandrel, it will be much easier for you to see the shape that we have just created. So we're starting to look a little bit like ear wires right now. What we're going to do, and you can do this while your form is still on the mandrel because it enables you to hold that shape a little better. I just wanted you to see exactly what we were doing. So I'm going to hold that into position, and then I'm going to use my thumb to create a curve on the wire that's coming away at the base. I'm just going to push that in to create a nice sweeping arc just coming away there. Take the ring mandrel back out and you can see that we've got a pair of matched ear wires. Put those side by side. This is a little bit out of true, but I will absolutely flatten that before we go any further. Just get those nice and firmly into position. So I'm going to stack them again, one on top of the other. You may like to shorten the wires. And just holding those side by side, we can make sure that they do end up exactly the same size. So I'm going to trim that to my desired length, taking those tails away to the scrap pot immediately. And what I like to do is just have a very gentle kick up on the end of my ear wires, like so. It makes inserting them into a lobe piercing that little bit easier. That's the very basics of the design. What you can do, if you wish, is to refine that slightly. I think I'd quite like to see a little bit more of an angle just here. And then close that down at the bottom. So those to me look a little bit more like traditional ear wires. It's not a difficult procedure to follow through. One thing I would say is when you are designing to use in a piercing, we need to be sure that we are not going to hurt the skin as we pass the metal through. So if you don't have a burr cup device, then what you can do is use a little bit of wet and dry sandpaper just to smooth those ends away. Another thing that you can use is an emery board or one of those really handy four-sided nail blocks. So I will make sure that I'm drawing the sandpaper away and down towards the end of the ear wire, and it is much easier with a nail block. Like so, before passing it over the sandpaper or over the emery board, just to make sure that those are smooth and comfortable when they go through the piercing. I don't make items for piercing other than lobe because I don't have the skills. So all I would say is other piercings I don't really have the experience for. But for your traditional lobe piercing, these are perfectly passable. Now, before you add this to jewellery, because we're working with that 20 gauge wire, you will need to strengthen up all of this without changing the shape of it too much. So you could hammer very, very lightly indeed, But what I tend to do is pass over the whole thing with a flat pair of pliers. I'm just going to use my bent chain nose pliers because they're right here. And I'm just opening and closing, changing how the electrons sit side by work hardening the design. What I'm not doing is work hardening too close to that angle down at the base loop, just in case I want to turn that through 90 degrees when I decide what charm drop or what it is I'm going to add from the base of my ear wire. So just getting that nice and straight, giving that a little bit of a squish and a squeeze. You've made your very own ear wires, and they're not that different to the ones that you can get in bulk. I would say it's really lovely to have the coil and the bead on there, which of course you can add into position if you desire. And then you can pop a little bit more of an angle on the loopy section up at the top of the design. But there you go, quick and easy earring tutorial.